Yatish, how are you? Seeing after a very long time. Hello, everybody. We are starting now because this meeting is live streamed on 3 different websites on the rationalist.net, sanalidamargu.com, and on terali.org. So we may have less number of people in Clubhouse, but a lot of people are watching us on the live video. So the meeting is just beginning. As many of you may know, we had a meeting about the same topic yesterday in Malayalam language and have been trying to cover a lot of interesting aspects which was not known to the general public because we have been very closely associated with what has been happening in Iran. Today, I have to share you something very special and unique that happened in London in support of the struggle that is going on in Iran. The leaders of the ex-Muslim community, former Iranian activist, now living in London and leading the ex-Muslims of UK, Maryam Namazee and her colleagues had a public demonstration and a public display of the issues in Iran in the city of London. And one of the finest ways or very harsh ways of expressing dissent against the Islamic authorities who are stopping the freedom of women, Maryam Namazee, with the help of a body artist, wrapped herself in an Iranian flag and publicly unveiled herself. That was a very strong way of expressing the freedom of the female, which is a very unique way which only Maryam Namazee could do, but that has been bringing in public attention all around. Richard Dawkins has tweeted today, expressing the hope that this revolution, which is happening in almost all provinces of Iran, would perhaps eventually overthrow the dictatorial regime of the Islamic Republic. Let's hope so. But let's see one by one what has been happening there and what is the immediate provoking point that triggered the revolution that is led by the women's movement for their freedom to live the way they want it and to live in a way that the clergy and priesthood would not dictate them to do. As you all know, there have been many efforts earlier to raise public opinion and raise a kind of rebellion against the oppressive Iran regime by the women community. From 2019, there was a huge uprising, which was unfortunately suppressed. But what happens now is something quite unique. Starting from the Kurdish area, everywhere in Iran, women are on streets, responding to the oppressive behavior of the morality police, which ended up the life of Mahsa Amini. women are taking away their hijab, burning it publicly, and dancing around with the happiness and ecstasy that they are out of this hijab. They're no more afraid of the morality police. Hundreds of them were arrested now. Many of them, more than 100 people reportedly are killed. Still, the crowd is not stopped. They are onto the street. They are dancing, they are singing, burning their hijab and cutting their hair and declaring their freedom. This is a revolution totally different from the 1979 revolution, which brought in the Islamic regime in Iran. 1979 is a turning point in modern history, because that's the first time we saw in the modern times a revolution taking us back centuries from the contemporary world. A comparatively liberal society transforming into a very conservative, reactionary society. One of the first things that the Iranian Revolution asked was to stop showing the hair of women. They wanted women to wear hijab. They wanted women to wear a loose cloth which would not show the shape of their body. It was an official declaration in 1979. And before that, Iran was a liberal society. Tehran was like one of the, one of any of the Western capitals. There were fashion shows. There were, singing people. There were dancers. There were people who were in the streets celebrating their life. Suddenly, everything changed. A movement which should have been for transforming the society for a better one, eventually turned into something that they never expected. It has taken them back to the 7th century. An official theocracy came into being. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, who was living in France, came down to Tehran and took over the religious leadership as well as the political leadership of the country. And before that, there is something that we all have to remember. The Iranian movement, which culminated into the Islamic Revolution, was not actually started by the clergy or the Islamic radicals. It was a movement that was coming from the universities for a better society. They thought the Pahlavi Shah's regime was very oppressive. It was authoritarian. Well, one has to remember that it was a secular authoritarian regime that was existing. It was a monarchy that was existing. Secularism devoid of democracy would not bring any result. That is what was happening there in Iran. The foundation of the empire of Shah was not based on democracy, was not based on the idea of human liberty based on their political decision-making, but it was a monarchy, but with a lot of liberal ideas, which was possible for people to enjoy, but nothing more than that. 25% of the population were living in comparatively better economic situation, whereas almost 75% of the Iranian population were under poverty line. They had huge petroleum wealth, but the wealth generated by the petroleum was not reaching out to people. There was a kind of feudal system there. The land was owned by the landlords, who were not giving the benefits of the land to the people who were working in that. The earlier tradition of tobacco cultivation has ended, and the fertile land at one side, unlike the Arab countries, the oil-rich country, a country which is full, which has a lot of natural resources, could not bring a better life to the people. There was unhappiness, there was resentment. This political unrest was, in a way, shown as a point of rallying by the leftists of Iran at that time. Interestingly, the Iranian resistance movement against the authority of the Shah, the emperor, the monarch, was not by the clergy, as I told earlier, but it was led by liberal forces, the left forces, and the Islamists in one go. They all joined hands together. Most of the political observers at that time thought that Iran would be having a new left regime coming to power. That was the kind of influence the Tudeh party, the then Communist Party of Iran, had there. Iran and Afghanistan were, and as it is now also, strategically very important places and economically important places. And that was a point of interest of all the major international power centers. During this time, there was still the Cold War, in its full form. There were two major blocs, the Soviet one led by Soviet Union and the other led by United States of America. Both the power centers of the world had an interest in Iran. And Iran, of course, at the time of the Iranian Revolution, was very close to the Western regime with United States. The Soviet Union had an interest, like in Afghanistan also. Both Soviet Union and United States had interest because of the strategic position of these places. And the major political developments that went forward decades before the 1979 revolution was a kind of a power struggle between the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini and the Shah of Iran. Khomeini was living in Paris. He was not living in Iran. He was living in Paris and was trying to influence an Islamic movement in Iran. There were other Islamic leaders also in Iran, but he was perhaps the person who wanted to take the Islamic movement to its own course without having any coalition with other partners, the liberal partners as well as the left partners. The three major forces who wanted to come to power or bring out a political change by overthrowing the regime of the Shah finally saw that their movement was getting a lot of public support. People were coming to streets, and the demonstrations that were taking the whole people onto the street for a big political change. They were asking for two major things. One was the end of monarchy and a democratic system. The second requirement that people were taking forward was simply a desire to get the economic system totally changed, wherein the benefits of the wealthy nation reaching the people. So there was a kind of a revolution which was possible for a democratic process at one side and for the redistribution of the wealth on the other side was hijacked by the Islamic forces. This was happening in the last phase of the Iranian Revolution. The Iranian Revolution, the movement, which had three different phases, as I've told you earlier, the democratic forces, the leftist forces, as well as the clergy on the other side. But the Islamic forces gave an impression that they are cooperating with the democratic forces and the leftist forces. And all of them thought, or perhaps all of them wanted to have their hegemony established. The moment Shah has left Iran, fearing public wrath, one saw Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, coming from Paris. He was continuously campaigning for an Islamic republic, an Islamic society where things are done according to the diktats of Sharia as per the interpretation of the Shia leader. He wanted a new society which would not be really a new society, but an old society brought in front of the then situation. And he wanted the clergy to take over the political power, the clergy to decide about everything. And for him, he wanted a kind of a morality police which would take people to something that he thought was moral and what he thought was right. So a kind of a coalition would be coming was the expectation of a lot of people. The moment Ayatollah Khomeini reached Iran, the first thing that they have done was anybody who remained in the country, who was in association with the Shah regime, were all cornered, they were all arrested, and in a few days, they were all executed. Then there were three major forces again, the leftist, the Tudeh party and the leftist forces and the democratic forces. And after a few months, before the first election, came an announcement from the then regime, the new regime, which was an interim regime before a democratic process to be established. They announced that there was an effort of a coup d'etat. A coup was in planning, and they charged the democratic forces as well as the left forces responsible for that. All of them were arrested. The Islamic clergy took in charge, and the democratic leaders as well as the left leaders were all arrested. And in a few weeks, in summary trial, concurrent trial, they were all executed, with only the clergy and the pro-Islamic forces remaining in power. What the left thought and what the democratic forces thought that they could achieve in cooperation with the Islamic forces to overthrow the monarchy was going in total vain. A new regime came, which became worse than what they had earlier. The monarchy has gone, democracy has come, but a theocracy, a theocratic democracy emerged in Iran. They decided to rewrite the constitution. The Iranian constitution was rewritten. The Iranian constitution was rewritten, and the new laws were very clearly insisting on the Islamic ideology which Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini wanted to establish. And it was in that process that one of the first laws that came, that all women shall cover their head when they go to public, and their bodies should be covered with a loose cloth which would not show their shape of their body. There was no excuses. Anybody who violated this were arrested. They were tortured. And on the other side, though officially was not allowed in the rural areas, the local clergy started re-establishing their ideas about an Islamic society. Anybody who was accused of adultery, anybody who was accused of having premarital sexuality were cornered. They were half buried and stoned to death. Stoning to death became a normal practice in most of the suburban areas of Iran. Well, Iranian constitution does not agree for stoning to death, but that was happening. I mean, till very recently, it was happening in different parts of Iran. Everybody took law in their hand and tried to interpret the law the way they wanted it. The central political authority insisted on a kind of Islamic regime which would be guarded by the morality police, or the set of people who were controlled by the supreme religious commander officially, and who would decide what is right and what is wrong. Anybody whom they accused of having an immoral life, and what would be immoral? If you are going out with a person who is not your immediate relative, that would be considered immoral. If you're going out in the street and if your hijab is little misplaced, that would be immoral. If you laugh loudly, publicly, that would be considered immoral. People started escaping the country. And a lot of people otherwise, if you know, a lot of Iranian students were studying all across the world, in Britain, in India, in different parts of the world. At the beginning of this meeting, I spoke about Maryam Namasi, an Iranian activist who was demonstrating yesterday in London. Maryam Namasi was a student in Agra in India at that time. She was an activist. She was connected with the Tudeh party. And she went to London and tried to establish a resistance movement there. London is a place where a lot of Iranians finally reached. And there they met each other. They plotted how to reach out people. They started a kind of communication system. Before internet came, 1979, before internet came as a major communication method, they started reaching out people by recording material on tapes and sending to their fellow people. By 1990s, when internet communication and social media started reaching out people, they started reaching the Iranian community with social media. It's a very active resistance movement all across the world where former Iranian activists or Iranians who could escape the system. And many people, that you know, in the secular movement with an Iranian background started a very active communication, very active campaign against the foundations of Islam. People like Amini Nawabi, people like Maryam Namasi, a lot of people everywhere. So they all started reaching out people using social media. Social media became the tool to reach out people. And all those people who were in Europe or in Northern America who reached out the people in Iran realized that there was a huge response to what they speak. A couple of years back, there was a survey in Iran to ascertain what percentage of people would follow Islamic life, or given an opportunity, how many of them would leave Islam to freedom, to secularism, to non-religious life. More than 52% of the Iranian population would prefer to leave Islam, but they have no choice. The whole younger generation of Iran are for freedom. They are for a secular society. They are for a liberal society. They are against the theocratic authority of Iran. Every uprising has shown that there are thousands and thousands of people in the streets, all youngsters. And it is in this backdrop that we have to see the story of Mahsa Amini, who was in her early 20s, who was brutally beaten up and was killed. Mahsa did not actually refute the idea of having a hijab. She did have a hijab. She was a model, she was an activist, she was trying to express herself in different artistic ways, and there was a lot of anger against her. She was caught by the morality police with an allegation that her hijab was not, she was not wearing the hijab properly, and a part of her hair was seen outside. Imagine, she was wearing a hijab. Still, they found it a mistake that some of her hair was seen outside. She was beaten up. They slammed her head on the vehicle, and they were beaten with the beating sticks on her head. And of course, she died. The official version is that, she had a heart problem, and of course, she had a stroke. The family clearly says that there was no history of any kind of illness than minor cold or something like that that she had. On 19 September, in response to the public campaign that came out, that started in a way in response to Mahsa Amini's death, calling for the end of the hijab era, the government has started a very interesting method to stop it. They stopped all internet possibilities for the people in the country. So there is no social media available in Iran now. There is no WhatsApp, there is no Facebook, there is no way that you can reach out people. And that was the only way that the activists could mobilize people for these demonstrations. Now imagine, every single day, there are 10,000s of people on the streets now. They don't have any internet. They don't have any social media. They don't have any known ways of reaching out people by communication. Word to word, mouth to mouth, people are talking to each other and joining in the streets and fighting. They are fighting in a very, what you call, and if you have seen the images of the way they have been responding to the call for the end of hijab, it's so inspiring. Making a bonfire and women loudly singing and dancing around and taking their hijab and throwing it into the fire. They come out and cut their hair and remove the Iranian flag and put the cut hair as the Iranian flag instead of the Iranian flag and raise it up. It's a revolution led by women who are desiring freedom against the suppression of the religious authority. And it's catching like a wildfire. Will Iranian regime come down with this revolution? It can, if it further goes, and if it goes beyond their calculations, and if they cannot suppress it, it can overthrow the government. That is what many people are expecting. It can be suppressed also. Like the 2019 revolution uprising, it was suppressed. There was another student uprising 1 year back that was suppressed. The possibilities are there. It can go further forward, and people coming out and completely denying the authority of the theocratic regime, completely defying the rules of Islamic rule, taking out their hijab. And now in Iran, in Tehran streets, women are now, just for showing a part of her hair while wearing hijab, when Mahsa Amini was killed, now there are thousands of people in Tehran streets without hijab. Many of them publicly burn it down. They sing loudly, they dance in the streets, and they are all for freedom. Will they totally suppress this women revolution? If they suppress this, that may not be the end of the movement. If they are successful in suppressing these people, it will again erupt up. I am confident that the Iranian revolution, the new Iranian revolution of the liberty of the man, woman, and children, that is going to take place now, and that is encouraged by all the Iranians who are living outside Iran, and all the progressive people and all the liberal forces all around the world. and Iranian authorities have to respond to it. Either they have to modify their rules and accept the demand of the people, or even if they suppress it partially at this moment, it will again erupt, and it will see to it that what was happening in 1979 will be reversed, and there will be a new regime in Iran very soon, which may be rewriting history, which was written in a wrong direction in 1979. I have very close association with many of the ex-Muslims who are living outside from Iran. Some years back, when I was living in India, there were Iranian students coming to the International Kathakali Center. Kathakali is a form of dance in India, and I happened to be the president of the Kathakali Center. And there were Iranian students joining there to study Kathakali dance. And that was a declaration of freedom. That was a declaration of their identity. And many of them, at least 5 or 6 of them in the Kathakali Center, were studying dancing. They were singing loudly. This morning I had communication from one of the former students there from Canada. She wrote that though she is not in Iran, her family members, her friends are all fighting for freedom. All of them are fighting for freedom. Freedom from the oppression, freedom from the authority of the clergy, freedom from the rotten Islamic system. That's what people are trying to achieve now. If they are successful, yes, as I earlier said, that would be the reversal of a process that started from the end of the Second World War, wherein a lot of Islamic states were established formally and monarchies were established, and everywhere there'll be a new wave reaching. I mean, like in the spring, the Arabian Spring, which started in a small way in Tunisia, which changed governments and overthrew governments in Egypt, in Tunisia, in Libya, in many other countries, it has overthrown the governments, and they have seen that system could be changed. This could be the second wave after the Arabian Spring. I really wish that this movement reach out to people further, and people don't lose their courage and strength, and they maintain their capacity to fight out the clergy and authority, and they will establish a new era of Persian heritage, which was once upon a time a great center of culture and civilization, of art and culture. Thank you very much. If anyone who is in the clubhouse who would like to comment on or make some contribution or want to ask some question, they're welcome.
Make me moderator.
Yeah, oh, sure. Unni, you want to speak something? You are from...
Yeah, Sanal. It is a simple question. How you define freedom of literature, freedom of thought, freedom of liberty, and freedom of including dressing and education, and such a way we have a 7 continental. There is a Middle East, Far East, Indian continental, African continental, Europe, America, and Russian continental. I'm just geography, maybe some mistake will be added. You can correct also. So what's currently is Iranian. That's not only Iranian. but it's a human liberty, freedom of thoughts, freedom of literature, freedom of how we can classify this. Thank you.
See, there are many kinds of authoritarian regimes. See, there are dictators in many countries. It may not be connected with religion. There are dictators, there are despots, there are, systems that looks like democracy, but which are not democracy. There were ideologies, in power in some other countries. We have, at one side, we have North Korea. We have, on the other side, we have Iran or other dictatorial regimes. There are monarchies, like in Saudi Arabia. It's an absolute monarchy. But I don't know whether it can be called a pure theocracy, because it's not religion that is ruling there, but the monarchy that's ruling on the basis of Iran. So if you take the classification on the basis of geographical divisions, we may not reach anywhere when we try to understand the totalitarian regimes that exist in different countries. If you take the whole of West Asia, there are islands of democratic traditions. In Egypt, for example, it's not an absolute theocratic situation that is existing in Egypt. There is democracy, but there are still very strong elements of Islamic influence. Saudi Arabia, for example, where there is no election, but only monarchy is there. And the United Arab Emirates, again, are monarchies, but where they try to modernize and try to get adjusted to the new system of world order, but still they're very slow. But on the other side, there are other Muslim countries, for example, far away, Indonesia, Malaysia, all these countries. So all these countries have one thing in common. So if you classify the countries purely geographical, we may not be able to understand the current crisis on the basis of religious oppression. I would classify the despotic authorities, no matter whatever system they have, can all be classified into one major group, but the religious theocracies can be classified into another set of governments. And a third is a religious influence is very high, and the elected governments are following the religious rules. These are the three different patterns that we have. Whereas monarchies, like in United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, they have a different pattern. How do we classify all these on the basis of geography? But wherever people's freedom is stopped, wherever the fundamental rights are stopped, whether it is religious or political, whether it is, run by despots or religious rulers, whether it is run by theocracies or with ideologies, what we need is a liberal society where individuals' freedom is respected and democratic process is accepted. And Iran is a special case because that's a democracy. That's a theocratic democracy. That's the fundamental nature of the whole thing. There is an elected government, but the elected government, to contest in an election, you need to be a follower of the system. Otherwise, you are not allowed. And any election will be sanctified by the supreme religious authority. So it's a classical case of a theocracy. Fighting a theocracy is one of the biggest fights that's possible in our generation, because we don't have much theocracies in the world now. All theocracies ended in the last few centuries. This is one of the last theocracy. The fight in Iran is for freedom, for liberty, for the right of the individual, the right of a woman to decide what she wants in her life, and fight against the clergy and authority, and fight against theocracy. So we cannot geographically divide this phenomenon, but maybe each country we have to identify separately and understand accordingly.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next, Shakti. Okay. Okay, Shakti. Is audible.
I think she's not audible. Move to the next person.
Okay. Next is Jadish.
Good evening, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible. Yes.
Yes.
Sir, it is good that some positive changes is happening in Iran, some liberation. But will they make any change in the government over there? So some liberation is going on, some strikes are going on, some activities are going on. Will it affect anywhere in the government structure? That's my question, sir.
Ritesh, I mean, that's what we all are hoping. There are two possibilities. Well, I would say there are, two or three possibilities. One major possibility is that this movement get further acceleration. It will snowball further, and that will repeat something like happened in 1979, where the political leadership would have to, they will be forced to, leave, and they will take over the power. That's one possibility. The second possibility, they'll be suppressed totally because they're so brutal, and they have a very clear idea that all kind of uprising of women should be stopped. They may use further force. They may kill out a lot of people, and they would be totally suppressed. Second possibility. A third possibility would be they would be trying to see this revolt, and they want to cool down the people, and they may make some cosmetic changes in the system. Even if there is a cosmetic change in the system, that if women are allowed to go out independently without any family members along their side, or if they are allowed to be in the streets without a hijab, that would make a big change. That would be the beginning. Once opened, it will open the floodgates. But in whatever situation, even if it is suppressed, and which I wish should not happen, even if it is suppressed, that will be already, the beginning of a change, and that will encourage, that will give strength to a lot of people to further continue the struggle. If not today, tomorrow, this regime should go and will go.
Can I ask one more question?
Please.
It's related to India, sir. So throughout the world, we are seeing this agitation of Muslim women coming out from Parda and hijab and all. But in India, actually, it's no moment like that. Moreover, these people, this Islamic women think that it's their birthright. And they more want to be in that. Why it's so, sir? Even the Saudi, there's a revolution, even the Pakistan, everywhere is all over the world Islamic domination. But in India, it's just opposite. Why it's so, sir?
There can be two sides for that. Number one, see, if anybody wants to wear a hijab for religious reason or otherwise, it should be their freedom. Nobody should be stopping them. If anybody wants to have the religion expressed publicly, that shall be their freedom. No civilized society would stop the right of an individual to express their religion. But secular societies, advanced secular societies, only insist that they should not have any religious costumes or religious identities when they represent the state or when they teach in a school. That is very important. For example, in France, that's what they're insisting. If anybody wants to wear hijab, that's their freedom. But if anybody is forced to wear hijab, that's oppression. That's a very clear difference. See, I mean, in any case, niqab or parda or hijab is clearly a sign of oppression. But if somebody wants that, we cannot stop them because it's their freedom. Having said that, the kind of idea that many people try to promote, for example, in India, that hijab is a choice. If it's a choice of anybody in their private life, nobody should be able to stop it because they have their right. I'm very clear about that. I clearly understand that hijab is a point of oppression. It's a point of women's suppression, but all the same, one has the right to wear that. But the claim that it is a choice is not correct, actually. Most of the people who are wearing a hijab are pressed to do that by the families, their fathers, their brothers, their male members in their families. That is why even in Delhi, where a lot of people would wear niqab in many parts of closer to Jama Masjid, for example. When you go in a bus in Delhi, if you have seen it, many of them would be having a totally body covering niqab. But the moment they are in the bus, many of them students, they would just remove it, fold it and put it in the bag. And they would have a jeans and a t-shirt under that. And they would go out in the city with that. Back to home, closer to home, they would come back again into that. Why do they do it? I've seen the same thing in many parts of the world. Why do they do it? They're afraid somebody back in home. They want to show that they're wearing their niqab or hijab. Why? Because it's not their choice, but it's a choice, a pressure from the family. So women are not allowed to choose for themselves whether they want to leave it or they want to have it. Are the families pressing them? That's the question. In India, there is an uprising Islamic radical movement very clearly. And the orientation that they are trying to build up is hijab as a symbol of their Islamic identity. And there are, as in Karnataka or in many other parts of Kerala and all, they try to project hijab, wearing hijab as a symbol of their political identity. Well, the question again is to be raised. Are they actually doing it for themselves? If they're doing it for themselves, if it's their choice, we should not oppose that. But the reality is, most of them privately agree that they are forced by the families to do it. There are colleges, who insist on women coming on niqab. But on the other side, if it's forced by somebody to remove their hijab, that should not be allowed also. But in any case, in a public education institution where children are having the uniform, that should not be there. But on the other side, if anybody wants it, it's their freedom. But nobody shall be forced. In a situation, for example, where state is not forcing, like in Iran, but families are forcing. If that is there, those girls should have the freedom to resist the pressure from the families without fear of consequences. They should be able to remove it or they should be able to wear it. The freedom is the key of the whole thing, to have it or not to have it. But they should be able to decide. That is to be guaranteed, and that's not what is happening now.
Okay, thanks, sir. Shakti, are you audible now?
Let me try. Am I audible now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Yes, I think the question that I wish to raise was discussed just now. That while I appreciate what's happening in Iran, that women are out and fighting for their rights, it's a shame that closer home, in our country, in Karnataka especially, women are foregoing their rights to education because they want to, or they're conditioned to believe that they want to wear hijab. I hope that politics around hijab does not happen and these young girls who are able to come out of the conditioning as it was just discussed by the families that hijab is the way to be, they can understand the importance of education, ensure that they are going and completing their education and are able to establish or choose or because of being educated, I hope they make the right choices to forego hijab and are able to discuss and convince their families that this is not the way a woman. I don't think any woman chooses to wear hijab by choice. It's a patriarchal society, and especially the Muslim patriarchal society, which insists that women should wear hijab. It's not the same practice for men and women, clearly. And I hope that these young girls, because of the politics around hijab, are not going to miss out on their education, which is so vital for a woman to attain an equal opportunity or position of equal opportunity in the society. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's very important that the women are not taken into this action. For example, in India, those families or those communities who try to tell that if our children are not allowed to wear hijab in this school, they would not allow them to study. They're forcing, they're making a moral pressure on the system that either they should wear hijab or they should stop their education. So that's the way, I mean, it is tried in many countries. I mean, one good example is Sweden. There are a lot of people who have migrated from Islamic countries in Sweden, wherein the families are insisting that they would wear niqab, they should wear completely body covering costumes. And one of the oldest traditions of Sweden of mixed swimming places are now changing because the society is so considerate about the right of the women to have the better things in the society, like the right of children having education at stake, for example, when families insist on hijab. In Sweden, the right of the women to have a possibility of a swimming place would be denied if, hijab is not allowed, or not hijab, but the niqab is not allowed. So therefore, stopping the old tradition of Sweden having coexist, the men and women having the same swimming pool, they have started making separate swimming pools for those who want to have exclusive women swimming pools, and with special costumes for the Muslims. This is a kind of compromising of a great tradition of liberty for which women were fighting for a long time. Women were fighting for a long time to be free from the niqab and hijab. Now they are forced by families in India, and they're threatening the system that if we don't allow this, we would not send our children to school. So the choice is whether they should have education, or the society should insist on transforming the society despite their pressure. This is a very important question. I would say that they should not be denied education, because once they get education, there is still a chance that they come out openly to stand for their freedom and for their rights. So it's a very, very tricky question to handle it when the radical organizations are forcing the children of their families to go with hijab and niqab. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next, Salim. Salim is not on. Kunyama, next.
Good evening. Thanks again to conduct another meeting today, and dedicating the time, weeks and days for all of us for many years now. Greatly appreciated your effort, and that's without any kind of conditions, dedicating the time to improve the knowledge and other important matters of the society. Thanks again. I hope this time, third time, Iranian women and children get their way not to wear hijab. If they're wearing, it is their choice, like kind of a freedom. 50s they failed, 70s they failed. Now today they are again fighting for this. Hope this time they get some kind of freedom through this. I think they are politically kind of leaning to Russian regime at this time. America is there, but Biden is trying to establish connections with them more. And yesterday, day before yesterday, a lady was begging a reporter of Middle Eastern Iranian origin that to keep the line open, because they are very afraid they cannot come and express, because they blocked all the medias there. There is no Wi-Fi, nothing like that. I don't know when Biden is going to sign something to encourage Elon Musk to go there and do something. Hope this will happen. This is what they are begging again and again. Keep it open. I hope this happen, and this time those poor people, especially women and children, get some kind of freedom. Thank you. This is all I want to express.
Yeah, there is a very important point that you have mentioned. The communication system is completely blocked now because there is no internet. There is no way of directly communicating with social media, and the mutual connection of people could be completely damaged in the present situation. Also, to experiment other possibilities like satellite communication and all is not possible there, because there is an international what you call a blockage on Iran because of their refusal to have a verification on the nuclear plants that they have. So there is no additional projects can be started by the Western industries in Iran, including any kind of satellite communication. So the very law that has been used to bring Iran into a line can now be used by Iran, that there is no other new communication system possible. That is where Elon Musk is trying to do something, and new communication possibility is there. I mean, with his satellite communication, he has one of the best satellite communication network in the world. And if a sudden change of law in United States is possible to help the people in Iran, there can be a new way of communication, new way of, directly reaching with internet. Making internet accessible to people without the state system in control of it. I mean, that could be a new opening, like the latest iPhone, for example. If you don't have directly internet, you can directly communicate via the satellite and reach people. If such a system is possible, I mean, people can use that. But for that, the present blockage has to end also. That's the self-contradictory structure that they have. But the way of public response to the system in Iran is expressed in very different ways. If you have seen the picture of Christian Amanpour of CNN, who wanted to interview the head of state of Iran, who was visiting New York for a United Nations summit there. So she wanted to interview him. And this, the present president of Iran is a very radical, Islamist, and he wants any woman coming in front of him. For him, they should all wear a hijab. That was not a practice anywhere. And when, of course, when in his palace, if somebody comes, one can insist on that. But Christian Amanpour, a well-reputed journalist, she said she would not wear any kind of hijab to interview a head of state. She's one of the topmost journalists in the world. And she published a picture of, two chairs. In front of her is an empty chair where the present president of Iran should sit for an interview with her. And he refused to come to the interview room because Christian was not wearing a hijab. It's a strong symbol. It's a strong, expression of, we don't care your authoritarian rule. We don't care your religious rules. Nobody in the world is going to accept this. You have to change. You have to change or you will be totally isolated. That's the message in that. And that's the message that should be given further forward. And that's where probably they will be forced to transform themselves.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next, Seeker.
Okay, good evening, you all, especially Sanals. What I would like to ask you, one of my confusion or my doubt that for your perception to see these revolutionary actions of happening in Iraq, where there is there is many elements are here, because there is what really happening, the revolution, reformation inside the religion, because the people, they are not against the hijab, because one simple things happening, the brutal force of the government, it is against the religion, not the hijab. The problem, either the woman, they want to wear the hijab or not, that is not the issue. They need the freedom. The religion itself, it allowing the freedom. Suppose Holy Quran is not compelled to wear this one. Even what happening, they want to reform the religion. The revolution is to what most of them are thinking. They want to purify they want to reform the religion. This is what happening in America and UK, where the Muslims are living with the family and they are wearing hijab. If they don't like, they are not wearing. It means they need the freedom to choose their dress. It is not compelled in Islam. That is what they want to be revealed. That point sometimes you are not mentioning here. That is, could you please clarify that? I think you would understand.
Yeah, I understand the point. The question there in Iran, it's not a single-folded issue. There are a lot of people, in Iran, there are a lot of atheists, very clear, non-religious people in Iran. There's been one of the biggest and powerful atheist movement was existing in Iran for a long time till this revolution. And the whole Tudeh party is very clearly atheistic at that time. Only the leaders were killed. A lot of people who are in the movement are not clearly atheistic. But those people who are fighting against hijab now are all not atheists. Most of them are not atheists. They are still Muslims. But they don't want a law that forces them to wear hijab. In 1979, there is a law. It's not Quran. It's not Sharia. It's a law in Iran passed by not by the parliament, but decreed by the supreme religious authority, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, which was ratified by the parliament later, that people are asked to wear hijab. It's against this law that people are now fighting, because this law is symbolic of oppression of women. The law not only asks them to wear hijab, but also it forces all women to wear any dress without showing any shape of their body. It should be a loose outfit only. That is written in the law. It's not about Quran. It's about the Iranian law that was passed in 1979, decreed by Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. That is the point of dissent here. But that's not the only point of dissent, because that's a rallying point. But on the other side, there have been surveys in Iran that shows that more than 50% of the people, at least in the urban cities, they want to leave the faith, but they have no freedom. If you leave the faith, you get death penalty. Still, people express their dissent against the faith. These are two different elements. Those people who want to leave the religion, that's one set of people. They don't have any right to leave the religion, because leaving religion is punishable by death. Number two, those people who want to leave religion, those people who want to remain in the religion, but a reformed Islam, all of them want these kind of oppressive laws discriminating women have to be stopped. That's a collective movement of the liberals in Islam as well as the non-believing people together. These are two different things. I know the very clear difference also. Both liberties are important, but here the major issue that is rallying the whole people that is why it has a huge support. The support is against the law of, for example, this organization, the Guidance Patrol. That is why the morality police is called. They can catch anybody, arrest anybody. They can keep people in prison. They decide what is morality. And there is no given special rules for that. They can, as per their own perspective, they can implement it. And they can argue and present it in the way they want it. If you go alone in the city, you can be arrested because that's immoral by the Guidance Patrol. So you would need several years to come out of it. If you are put in prison, you cannot defend for yourself. If you are accused of having premarital sexuality, the Guidance Patrol can arrest you. Imagine, there is no question of atheism or belief or anything of that sort. A woman who may be believing in Islam or still want to remain in Islam, but she would like to have a little freedom for herself. She would like to spend a little time with a person whom she likes, and she's not allowed. She can be in prison, and if they are accusing of any kind of sexual act before marriage, that can call for adultery, and adultery is punishable by death. And what shall be the evidence? The evidence of her, if there is one witness in favor of her, that is of no value. If there are 4 witnesses in her favor, that would be equal to 1 witness against her. If there are 3 witnesses, no. So one witness against her is as equal to 4 witnesses in her favor. That's how the law speaks. This is where the discrimination is in the fullest form of it. That's where people are rallying together, no matter whether one is atheist or reformist or whatever it is. There is no difference in this struggle between atheists and reformists. They all are together. All the forces who want liberty are all together now. They want just freedom. Freedom and freedom. That's the only question.
Okay, it's clear now. It's clear now.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next, Raja.
Good evening.
My question is, actually, I was listening to a debate between a famous feminist in Clubhouse and ex-Muslim, our friend Mr. Arif Hussain. And this feminist was telling this matter of hijab is just simply the matter of women. And there's no role for any men to involve in this subject, even it's a free thinker or a rationalist. My question, in Iran, I see pictures where the videos of ladies are fighting there. Are there men? Are they enjoying the support of men in Iran? I mean, there may be various organizations. There may be atheist organization. There may be free thinkers. There may be LGBT people. There may be political parties. There may be communists. Is this only one fight or strike by women only, or is it do this an organized effort? Are they? If it is an organized effort, there may be chance. Even it can change the regime of Iran. So, as you are watching this thing closely, the development in Iran, can you explain what's happening there?
See, well, Raja, the most interesting point is there can be any LGBT people in their closet. If anybody comes out with their sexual orientation or their gender preferences, you can face death penalty in Iran. For example, homosexuality is punished by death in Iran. You cannot identify a person, with your sexual orientation or your gender preferences of yourself. So that there's no question of identifying in that form. Second thing, there are no atheist organizations officially there. If you are in a Muslim family and if you're a Muslim and if you left the faith, you can be punished. As per the law, you can be punished with death. That is how the law is speaking. But the argument, I don't know who was these persons who are speaking about Arif, I know. If anybody speaks that a struggle should be only participated by those people who are suffering, for example, a struggle for the right of women only should be participated or attended by women, or the fight against hijab should be taken forward only by women who were forced to use hijab, would take to a different level of understanding, which means against slavery, only slaves shall fight. If anybody who would decide to end slavery, come up forward and speak against that, that should not be respected. For example, Abraham Lincoln would not have any right to speak against slavery. Imagine that. And a freedom struggle of a country shall only be fought by those people who are in that country who are oppressed. Only the oppressor should speak and others should not speak for them. Means the persons who fight in a very oppressive situation would be weaker and weaker if this clause is established in any given society. Women in hijab are afraid to speak out their minds. That is why they wear a hijab. Either they are believing in hijab as a part of their faith, or they are wearing just because they are forced to do it. Both of them would not have the courage to speak out. There will be other people who would giving them strength. And if you want to stop all those people who want to giving them strength and tell that, well, all those people who are trying to giving them strength should be restrained from that, only those people who are suffering should speak for it. Who they are speaking for? They are speaking for the oppressor, the theocratic leader, the clergyman they are speaking for. That's their wish. Express these kind of people. The clergymen want this. Only those people who are suffering should speak. No other people should support them. Only those people who are wearing hijab should speak for hijab. Otherwise, it's none of their business. Whose wish it is? It's the wish of the theocracy. It's the wish of the clergymen. It's the wish of the forces that are oppressing you. So those people who want to support any kind of democratic movement should all come forward. And that's what is happening in Iran. Only those people, you can also, with this, taking this argument, you can say that, why should we speak about it? Only those women who are forced to wear hijab, they should only speak only in Iran. Why should we speak? What kind of an argument? Oppressor's language, speaking for the oppressor. Very clearly, these are the language of the oppressor spoken by different tongues. Anybody who supports a movement should come forward. Any kind of genuine fight should be supported by all those people who find it important. Therefore, the struggle of women for freedom in Iran is also supported by men all around. That's not only women, but men and women jointly together fight for the liberty of women. Fight for the liberty to throw off this symbol of oppression that is hijab. That is why it should happen. That is how it is happening. And anybody who speaks otherwise is speaking for the wishes of the clergy.
Okay, thank you, sir. Nobody for more questions, sir.
Yeah, then we could come to an end now. Thank you very much. Yeah, please. Who are speaking now?
Sorry, sir.
Somebody was speaking now. I mean, yeah. Raja, you wanted to say something more?
Just to complete the question, I think you didn't tell me regarding the organization, which are the any official organizations are there in this fight, or only the ladies only are coming out and they're protesting in the street? I was asking that also.
I said it very clearly, probably you didn't hear it. In Iran, the struggle is led by no single organization. It's a spontaneous movement wherein 10,000s of men and women in the streets. But it's in the forefront, there are women. They are throwing their hijab, burning it, dancing and singing. And the men who support are also with them. They are all dancing together, singing together, and fighting against this regime. I mean, even at the stake of their own life. It's a collective struggle of men, women, and no matter what gender you belong to, people are fighting it together. But it's a fight for the right of women primarily. And anybody who says that women only should fight for women, only the oppressed should fight for the oppressed, only the person who are forced to wear a hijab should fight against that, they are speaking for hijab, they are speaking for the clergymen, they are speaking for the theocracy, because that's their wish, that only they speak. They can be suppressed easily. When people rally around them, when the people rally together to support and fight for them, the fight will be swelled and it will be encouraged and it will get more and more support. That's what the clergymen dislike. That's what the theocrats would dislike. And their supporters and their wishes are to be fulfilled by some people. And they would say that, well, others should not support, let them fight. And they would also say that only slaves should fight for slavery, against slavery. Only those people who are persecuted should fight against persecution. Only those people who are, oppressed should fight against oppression. No, that's not the way in the world. People who support any kind of noble ideas will all come forward collectively and we will fight it out together. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, sir.
Shall we end up now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for attending this meeting, and see you next week with another topic.
Okay, thanks, sir. Good night.
Good night. Yeah.